The silent courtroom, the Galactic High Court, was a place where justice was decided for hundreds of worlds. Its walls were made of black stone that seemed to swallow light, and tall silver pillars rose up like frozen lightning bolts. Hundreds of alien species filled the seats in curved rows that climbed high into the shadows. The air felt heavy, almost like the room itself was watching. On this day, everyone came to see one trial. In the center of the court, inside a glowing blue energy shield, sat an alien woman. She was tall, her skin a deep silver color, and her eyes glowed softly with fear. Her hands were chained together, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her name was Sci. To the court, she was a criminal, a thief, accused of stealing the royal data crystal. The punishment for such a crime was life in the mines, deep underground, until her body broke. She sat alone. Even her own people had turned. Away from her, the judge, a massive insectoid creature with 4 sharp arms and a face like a carved mask, sat high above on the main platform. Its eyes were dark red, unblinking. It tapped a claw against the bench, the sound sharp and cold. To one side of the room stood the prosecution, a tall reptilian lawyer with scales that shimmered green and gold under the lights. His tail swayed slowly, as if already confident he would win. The defense table was empty. Whispers moved through the crowd. Some laughed quietly. Others just stared with curiosity. No one expected the accused to have a lawyer. And if she did, how could they possibly win against the most feared prosecutor in the galaxy? Then the great metal doors of the court opened. Everyone turned. A small human child walked inside. No more than 12 years old, dressed in a plain black coat and boots that were a little too big. The child's hair was neatly combed. Their face calm. They carried a small satchel under one arm. The silence was strange. Even the judge tilted its head slightly. The child walked to the defense table, placed the satchel down, and looked directly at the judge. "I'm my mother's lawyer," the child said. For a moment, there was no reaction. Then the room exploded. With sound laughter, disbelief, shocked voices. A group of avian aliens flapped their wings in amusement. The prosecutor chuckled, his sharp teeth flashing. "This is not a game." The reptilian lawyer hissed, looking at the judge. "Surely, this court will not allow a child to speak here." The judge raised a claw and struck the floor with a sound like a thunderclap. The noise in the room died instantly. This court allows any who are chosen by the accused to speak. In their defense, the judge said slowly, "If this human child is the choice of the accused, then so be it." Sci looked up for the first time, her eyes meeting the child's. Something in her expression softened. The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. She didn't speak, she only nodded. The prosecutor shook his head in mock pity. "This will be quick." The child reached into their satchel and pulled out a worn data pad. "We'll see about that." Gasps rose again when the child's voice echoed across the room. It wasn't shaky. It wasn't timid. It was steady, like they had practiced for months. The judge leaned forward slightly. "Proceed." The child looked at the crowd, thousands of alien eyes watching. "I will prove that my mother is innocent. And I will prove who the real thief is." Laughter tried to rise again, but the sound died quickly. There was something about the way the child spoke that made people listen, even if they didn't want. The child placed a single sheet of old-style printed paper on the table. In a place where everything was digital and advanced, paper was almost a relic. The judge noticed. So did the prosecutor. No one said anything, but the crowd began to whisper what could be written there that was so important. For a long moment, no one moved. The child's eyes shifted toward the prosecution's table. And the reptilian lawyer's tail stopped swaying. In that second, the air in the courtroom changed. No longer was it a hall for mockery and entertainment. Now it felt like a battlefield. Somewhere high in the crowd, an old alien whispered, "This is going to be interesting." And for the first time in the trial, Sci's chains rattled not because she was struggling, but because her hands trembled with a spark of hope. The woman they called Criminal the Courtroom still felt tense after the human child's bold announcement. The crowd stared, waiting to see what could possibly happen next. But before the trial moved forward, everyone's eyes turned to the woman in the glowing blue energy shield, SERAI to the galaxy. She was a criminal to the child. She was simply Mother. Sci had lived most of her life in the outer colonies. Far from the shining cities of the core worlds, she had raised her child alone after her mate vanished during a mining accident years ago. Life had been hard to many days with not enough food, too many nights of working until her hands ached. But she never gave up. She taught her child to read early, to think clearly, to never bow to anyone who treated them as less, and now she was accused of stealing the most important object in the royal treasury, the Valen data crystal. The crystal wasn't just a jewel, it contained ancient codes and histories that the ruling council claimed were priceless. They said Sci had broken into a secure vault, bypassed advanced defenses, and taken it. The evidence seemed perfect. A recorded image showed someone of her exact height and build entering the vault. Her fingerprints were on the storage case. And when the guards searched her home, they found an empty container shaped exactly like the crystals. It was enough for the council to declare her guilty before the trial even began. The truth was far different. Weeks earlier, Sci had been invited to a royal reception. She rarely entered the halls of power, but she went because it meant possible work. The nobles treated her with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. She remembered passing by the vault doors once, guarded by tall insectoid sentries. She didn't know then that someone was watching her. Later that night, while she slept, strangers entered her home. She woke to find her front door open and the smell of metal in the air. By the time she stepped outside, armed guards were already surrounding her. They dragged her to the capital without explanation. She barely saw her child during those first days. They were taken in by a kind neighbor, an old trader who had once been a court scribe. That man gave the child something rare, full set of the Galactic legal code, printed on old paper in both alien and human languages. "If you want to save her," he told the child, "you'll need to know more than they do." And the child did. 4 nights, they studied by the dim light of a single lamp. They memorized ancient precedents, obscure articles, and forgotten rules that no one had used in centuries. They practiced asking questions the way lawyers did in the trials. Broadcast across the galaxy, every time the child thought about giving up, they remembered their mother's face, calm, even when the guards came. Her voice telling them to be strong. Now, in this courtroom, all those hours of study would be tested. The prosecutor cleared his throat, his voice smooth and mocking. "The defense may proceed, though I warn the court. This will not take long." The child ignored him. Instead, they looked directly at the judge. "Before we begin, I want the record to show something important," they said. "My mother has been kept in a containment cell for over 2 weeks without access to a translator, legal counsel, or even basic food rations guaranteed under Galactic law. Article 17. The crowd murmured. The prosecutor frowned. The judge's red eyes narrowed. Is this true? The reptilian lawyer's scales rippled. A minor oversight. A violation, the child corrected. Which means, under law, the prosecution, it's already in breach of due process. More murmurs. Some aliens in the back row nodded slowly, impressed. Sci sat straighter. She hadn't known the child was aware of these details. The prosecutor tried to change the subject, moving quickly to the so-called evidence. But each time he presented something, the child raised a small hand and said, Objection. At first, the crowd laughed. Then they began to listen. The child questioned the fingerprint, evidence pointing out that the image of the vault thief was too blurry to confirm identity. They asked for the chain of custody of the storage case, a phrase many in the crowd hadn't heard in years. The guard who had handled it stammered, unsure how to answer. Piece by piece, the perfect case began to crack. The prosecutor's tail twitched in annoyance. The judge leaned forward. "Young human, do you have more to present?" "Yes," the child said, voice steady. "But it's not just about my mother's innocence. It's about the person who really took the crystal." There in this room, gasps filled the air. All eyes turned to the crowd, searching for any sign of guilt. The prosecutor laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous." The child stepped closer to the center of the room, their small figure somehow commanding the space. "We'll see," they said. For the first time, the judge's unblinking eyes showed something unusual interest. Sci, behind the energy shield, felt her heart race. She didn't know how her child planned to prove it, but she knew one thing: they weren't afraid. And in the silent seconds that followed, the entire court leaned forward, waiting for what would come next. The first objection, the judge's red eyes glowed faintly as they signaled for the trial to continue. The crowd's earlier laughter had faded, replaced by quiet curiosity. A human child standing in the Galactic High Court was strange enough, but claiming the real thief was in the room. That was something no one could ignore. The prosecutor flicked his forked tongue, clearly eager to crush the child's confidence. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with false politeness, "I request permission to begin with the witness testimonies. Let us not waste time." The judge nodded once. "Proceed." The reptilian lawyer turned toward the prosecution's table, where a nervous alien guard sat waiting to speak. The guard was tall, with gray skin and 3 glowing eyes. His uniform was spotless, but his hands twisted together in his lap. He looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "State your name and role," the prosecutor ordered. "Garrick." "Royal, Vault Guard, 3rd Watch. Were you on duty the night the Valen data crystal was stolen?" "Yes," Garrick said quickly. The prosecutor smiled faintly. "And did you see anyone enter the vault?" "Yes." The accused, Sci. The guard pointed toward the energy shield where Sci sat. "It was her height, her walk. I swear it." "Was her?" The prosecutor nodded with satisfaction. "There you have it. A direct witness statement." "Objection," the child's voice cut in. Clear and sharp, the single word echoed across the chamber. Dozens of alien heads turned toward the defense table. The child was standing now, one hand resting on their satchel, the other raised toward the judge. The judge's mandibles twitched. "State your objection." The witness just claimed it. "Was my mother's height and walk," the child said, but he never mentioned seeing her face. In fact, the vault is known to have dim lighting and no open line of sight to the guard station. "Isn't that true, Garrick?" The guard shifted uncomfortably. Well, yes, the lights are low." "And the figure you saw," the child continued, "was wearing a hood, correct?" "Yes." "Then you couldn't have known for certain it was my mother." The prosecutor hissed. "Speculation." The witness recognized her gait. The child turned to him, recognizing a gait is opinion, not fact, and opinions can be wrong. A few chuckles came from the back rows. Even the judge tilted their heads slightly, considering the point. Objection sustained. The witness's statement will be noted as observation, not confirmation. The prosecutor's smile faded. The child didn't sit down. Instead, they stepped toward the center of the room. "Your Honor, I'd like to ask the witness another question." The judge's claw tapped once. "Proceed." "Garrick," the child said, their voice calm, "how long have you worked as a vault guard?" took 6 years. And in that time, have you ever had the security systems fail? The guard hesitated. No, except for that night. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The child nodded slowly, as if piecing something together. And during that failure, the security cameras went offline. Yes, for about 5 minutes, the child looked toward the judge. 5 minutes, Your Honor. Enough time for anyone to enter, plant evidence, and leave without being seen. The prosecutor slammed his clawed hand on the table. Irrelevant. The cameras have nothing to do with this trial. They have everything to do with it, the child replied, not raising their voice, but making each word carry. If the cameras failed, then any evidence gathered afterward could have been planted, including the fingerprints on the crystal. Case the judge glanced at the prosecutor. Is the witness's statement about a camera failure true? The reptilian lawyer's scales flickered in irritation. Yes, but it was likely a malfunction. The child smiled slightly. Or it was deliberate. Gasps spread through the gallery. The idea of tampering with the royal vault was serious. Enough to shift suspicion away from Sci-Fi. The judge struck the floor with their claw. The court will investigate the cause of the failure. The prosecutor's tail twitched angrily. If the defense is finished playing games, not yet, the child interrupted. One more question for the witness. Galactic. Who ordered? You two leave your post after the failure. The guard froze. His 3 eyes darted toward the prosecution's table. For the first time, the child saw fear in them. I can't say. You mean you won't say, the child corrected softly. The judge leaned forward. Witness, answer the question. The guard swallowed. It was a member of the Royal Council. The crowd erupted shouts, gasps, the sound of dozens of alien languages at once. The judge struck the floor again to restore order. The child stepped back, letting the weight of the answer settle over the room. They didn't have to explain what it meant. Everyone knew that if a council member had interfered, then this case was far more complicated than it first appeared. The prosecutor's eyes narrowed. You think you're clever, human, but you have no proof? The child smiled faintly. Not yet, but I will. The judge called for the next witness, but the atmosphere had already changed. The crowd, once amused, now leaned forward in their seats, curious to see what the human child would do next. Sci sat behind the energy shield, her heart pounding. For the first time since her arrest, she felt a fragile thread of hope. Her child was not only holding their ground, they were turning the case upside down. And as the trial moved on, the human child's mind was already several steps ahead, planning the next move in a game they could not afford to lose. The hidden evidence. The hum of the energy shield was the only sound as the judge called for a short recess. Guards moved through the aisles, but the crowd stayed in their seats, whispering excitedly in dozens of alien tongues. Everyone was talking about the same thing: how a human child had just forced a royal vault guard to admit that a council member had been involved on the night of the theft. When the judge returned, their red eyes scanned the courtroom. Defense. They said, you may proceed. The child stood, clutching their satchel. They walked to the center of the room, then looked directly at the judge. Your Honor, I request permission to present new evidence. The prosecutor hissed. Objection. This is highly irregular. The child didn't flinch. Irregular doesn't mean illegal. Article 45 of the Galactic Legal Code allows any defense to present material evidence at any point in the trial, so long as it directly relates to the charges. The judge's mandibles clicked. Permission granted. But if you waste this court's time, I won't. The child said from their satchel. They pulled out a small, rectangular device wrapped in cloth. Carefully, they unwrapped it, revealing a battered security recorder. Its surface was scratched, the power light flickering weakly. The crowd leaned forward. "This," the child explained, "is one of the original backup recorders from the vault security system. It was hidden behind an inactive panel, overlooked when the primary cameras were checked." The prosecutor's scales rippled in annoyance. "Where did you get that?" "From someone who doesn't trust the council," the child replied simply. "And before you claim it's fake, I have the official registry number right here." They tapped a code into the recorder, and the number appeared on the display. The judge checked the court records. Confirmed. The prosecutor bared his teeth. "It doesn't matter. If the main cameras failed, this one likely did too." The child smiled faintly. "We'll see." They activated the recorder. Static filled the air at first. Then the image cleared into a grainy, dimly lit view of the vault corridor. The timestamp matched the night of the theft. At first, nothing moved. Then, a shadow appeared at the far end of figure in a long cloak. The crowd held its breath. The figure moved toward the vault doors. It was tall, broader than Sci, and carried something that looked like a small emitter device. They held it against the door's control panel. Sparks flickered. The door slid open. The prosecutor's tail twitched violently. The child froze the image. "Your Honor, please note that the person in this recording is taller than my mother by at least 10 centimeters." The judge compared the figure to Sci, who was still sitting behind the shield, noted. And the child continued. "Please note the shape of the object in their left hand." The judge leaned closer to the display. "That appears to be a master key override." The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Master key overrides were forbidden except for high-level security officers and royal council members. The child advanced the recording. The cloaked figure entered the vault, disappearing from sight. 3 minutes later, they emerged, now holding something that glimmered faintly, even in the low light. The Valen data crystal. The prosecutor slammed his fist on the table. "Proves nothing. The image is too unclear to identify the thief." "Maybe," the child said calmly. "But it proves the thief was not my mother." The judge's red eyes glinted. "Agreed." The child didn't stop there. They pulled out another item from the satchel, a thin data wafer. "This is a copy of the guard rotation schedule from that night. It was altered after the theft." "How do you know it was altered?" the judge asked. "Because the original version," the child said, holding up a printed page from the old court scribe's archive, "shows that Garrick was never meant to be on duty in that corridor. Someone replaced his name hours before the theft." Garrick, still sitting nervously in the witness area, looked shocked. I didn't know." The prosecutor growled low. "Enough of this conspiracy nonsense. It's not nonsense." The child interrupted, their voice rising for the first time. "It's a setup. Someone needed a guard who wouldn't notice the cameras being taken offline. Someone who could be told to leave his post without asking questions. And then they planted false evidence to make it look like my mother was guilty." The crowd's energy shifted again. It was no longer just curiosity. Could feel the truth pushing its way into the light. The judge raised a claw. "The court will take this into consideration." The child glanced at their mother. Sci's silver eyes were wide, but this time they weren't full of fear. They were full of something else, pride. The prosecutor tried one last time to dismiss it all. "Your Honor, the defense is weaving a story without proof of identity. Unless they can show the court who the thief is, this is meaningless." The child looked straight at him. "Then, I guess it's time we set a trap." Gasps and murmurs spread like wildfire. The judge tilted their head, their tone curious. "A trap?" "Yes," the child said firmly. "If the real thief is here in this courtroom, they'll reveal themselves before the day is over. I just need permission to conduct one simple test." The judge's mandibles clicked again. "Very well. But this court will not tolerate deception. No deception, the child promised. Only truth. As the session ended for the day, the crowd left buzzing with questions. Who was the cloaked figure? Which council member had ordered Garrick away? And what kind of trap could a human child possibly set that would make the real thief expose themselves in front of the entire galaxy? Sarai watched her child being led back to the holding area. For the first time since this nightmare began, she dared to believe they might actually win. The trap for the real thief the next morning. The Galactic High Court was even more crowded than before. Word of the human child's claims had spread across the city, and now even the outer balconies were packed. Report drones hovered in the air, their lenses glowing as they streamed the trial to millions. The judge entered, their red eyes scanning the sea of faces. "Defense," they said, "you may proceed with your test." The prosecutor sat stiffly, his tail swishing like an angry whip. He clearly didn't believe a child could force a confession from anyone. But the child didn't seem nervous. They stood beside the defense table, their small satchel once again at their side. "Your Honor?" The child began. "Yesterday we saw footage of the cloaked figure holding the Valen data crystal. We also know the crystal is protected by ancient royal seals. These seals react to the person who touches it. How so?" The judge asked. "The crystal glows different colors depending on the bloodline or genetic code of the person handling it." The child explained. "If it was my mother, it would have glowed silver blue. But on the night it was stolen, a witness reported seeing a faint gold light. That color belongs to one very specific bloodline, the same bloodline as one of the council members present here today." Gasps filled the courtroom. The prosecutor stood quickly. "Objection. This is a dangerous accusation with no proof." The child shook their head. "That's why we're going to test it." The judge's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Proceed." 2 guards entered, carrying a clear security case. Inside, it was the Valen data crystal, glowing faintly from the ambient light in the room. Even through the glass, its beauty was breathtaking swirls of blue, gold, and green locked in its transparent core. The judge addressed the council members seated in a high box above the court floor. As part of this proceeding, each council member present will, in turn, handle the crystal for no more than 3 seconds. The reaction will be observed and recorded. The council members shifted in their seats. Some looked annoyed. Others looked nervous. The first member came down. They were a bird-like alien with long silver feathers. When they touched the crystal, it glowed pale green, ordinary, harmless. One by one, the others followed. Each time, the color changed slightly. But none matched the gold light from the night of the theft, until the last council member. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore a dark ceremonial cloak with golden trim. His name was Lord Veron, the most powerful figure in the council. He descended the steps slowly, his eyes never leaving the child. When he reached the crystal, he hesitated, afraid. The child asked quietly. Veron sneered. "Of a child? Hardly." He reached out and wrapped his large clawed hand around. The crystal dot the room lit up with a brilliant golden flare. The crowd erupted shouts, gasps, the flapping of wings and a hiss of scales. Even the judge leaned back slightly, their red eyes narrowing. Veron dropped the crystal as if it had burned him. "This proves nothing. The crystal reacts to many." "No," the child interrupted. "Only to your family line. It's written. In the royal archives, you were the only one in the vault who could have made it glow gold." The prosecutor looked shaken. "Your Honor," surely the child's voice cut him off. "Garrick, tell the court who ordered you to leave your post that night." The guard in the witness area looked pale, but spoke clearly. It was Lord Veron. The noise in the room rose again, louder this time. Drones zoomed closer, capturing. Every moment, The judge struck the floor with their claw until the room fell silent. "Lord Varen, do you deny this?" Varen's eyes darted from the judge to the prosecutor to the crystal on the table. I was checking the vault security. I feared for the safety of the crystal. Then why disable the cameras?" the child asked sharply. Varen's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. The child took a slow step forward. "You framed my mother. You planted the empty container in her home. You ordered the guard away so no one would see you. And you used the malfunction to steal the crystal for yourself." "That's a lie," Varen barked, his voice rising. "This is the word of a child against mine, eh?" The judge turned to the recorder drone hovering above the court. "Replay yesterday's recovered footage, overlay height and body scan data." The image of the cloaked figure reappeared in the air, now overlaid with glowing lines marking proportions and gait analysis. The results blinked into view. Match 99.8%, Lord V, EYR. My crowd roared. Several council members stood in shock. Guards moved forward, their weapons humming as they surrounded Varen. "This is outrageous," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the noise. "You cannot." The judge's voice cut through the chaos, cold and final. "Lord Varen, you are hereby detained for theft of the Valen data crystal and for the framing of Sci of the Outer Colonies. You will stand trial in your own right." The guards seized him, his golden cloak dragging along the floor as they led him away. Sci's chains deactivated with a soft click. The energy shield around her faded, and for the first time in weeks, she stood free. Her eyes found her child, and they smiled through tears. The crowd, stunned into silence, watched as the human child walked to their mother's side and took her hand. And as the judge adjourned the court for the day, whispers began to spread across the galaxy about the trial, where a child made the most powerful man in the council confess without saying a single word. The judge's dilemma, the golden cloak of Lord Varen, had barely disappeared through the courtroom doors when the noise returned, loud, chaotic, unstoppable. Everyone was speaking at once. Some shouted for Sci's release. Others demanded the trial continue. The judge struck the floor with their claw again and again, but the voices kept rising. Finally, the judge's voice cut through. "Order. This court will have order." The crowd slowly fell silent. All eyes returned to the bench, waiting for the words everyone wanted to hear, that Sci was free. But the judge did not speak those words. Instead, their red eyes narrowed. "The court acknowledges that Lord Varen has been taken into custody." However, their voice carried a heavy weight. "Removing him from the chamber does not, in itself, prove the accused is innocent." The entire courtroom gasped. The child stepped forward. "But we've shown the footage, the genetic glow, the guard's testimony." The judge's claw tapped the bench. "Evidence of another's guilt is not automatically proof of your mother's innocence. There are political matters too. Consider." The prosecutor, who had been sitting stiff and silent, suddenly leaned forward, sensing an opening. "Indeed, Your Honor, Lord Varen's crimes, if confirmed, are serious, but the accused may still have acted with him. Perhaps she was his accomplice." "That's not true." Sci's voice, hoarse from weeks in confinement, rang out for the first time. "I have never even spoken to Varen." The prosecutor smiled coldly. "And yet the empty container was found in your home that was planted." The child snapped. The judge raised a claw again. "Enough. The court must weigh all possibilities." A tension filled the air, thicker than before. The child could feel the mood shifting, the fragile thread of hope they had built starting to fray. It wasn't just about facts, now it was about power. High above, the council's empty seats loomed. Though Varen was gone, his allies were still there, watching silently. Their faces gave nothing away, but their presence was like a shadow over the proceedings. One of them, tall figure in emerald robes, rose and spoke. Your Honor, the outer colonies have a history of lawlessness. It is possible this woman was promised reward for aiding Varen. We must not set her free until the truth is absolutely certain. The judge's mandibles clicked slowly. The council's concern is noted. The child's hands clenched at their sides. They knew what this was stalling. The longer Sci stayed in custody, the easier it would be for the council to twist the story, erase the evidence, and quietly bury the truth. If that happened, all their work would be for nothing. They stepped forward again. Your Honor, you speak of truth. But how can there be truth if you keep my mother in chains after the one who framed her has been exposed? The judge's gaze fell on them. And you, young human, do you understand? What freeing her now would mean? It would shake the balance of this court. The council's authority would be questioned. Worlds might rebel. Then maybe the council should be questioned, the child said without hesitation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to the judge like that, not even seasoned lawyers. For a long moment, the judge said nothing. Then, in a low, even tone, they replied, "You are bold, human. Perhaps too bold." The prosecutor seized the moment. Your Honor, I propose the accused remain in custody until Lord Varen's trial is complete. If she is innocent, it will be proven then. Child's stomach tightened. That could take months. By then, Sci would be broken. No, they said quickly. I propose a challenge instead. The judge tilted their head. A challenge? Yes, the child said, their voice steady. Under Article 71, an accused citizen may request a trial of truth if the court believes political pressure could influence the verdict. The trial must be completed within 3 days with all evidence presented openly. The prosecutor's eyes widened. That article hasn't been used in a century. But it's still law, the child said. The judge's mandibles clicked again. They glanced toward the council box, where several members were now leaning forward, clearly displeased. Do you understand, the judge asked, that a trial of truth means the entire galaxy will see every detail of this case? Yes, the child answered without hesitation. That's exactly why I want it. The judge studied them for a long, tense moment. Then they nodded once. Very well. The trial of truth will begin tomorrow morning. The prosecutor slammed his hand on the table. Your Honor, this is madness. It is law, the judge replied. The crowd erupted again, but this time it wasn't all chaos, there was excitement too. The trial of truth was rare, almost legendary. It was a public stage where lies could not hide for long as guards escorted Sci back to her holding cell for the night. The child walked beside her. We'll win tomorrow, they whispered. She squeezed their hand gently. I don't know how you stay so certain. Because, the child said, looking up at her with unwavering eyes, the truth is on our side. And this time, everyone will see it. Above them, the council members exchanged dark glances. The child didn't notice, but they would soon. Learn that the next day's trial would be the most dangerous test they had ever faced. The verdict had shook the galaxy the next morning. The Galactic High Court looked different. The trial of truth had begun. Every seat was filled. Report drones hovered like silver bees in the air, broadcasting live to every corner of the galaxy. The judge's bench was lit brighter than before, and the council box loomed above like a shadowy fortress. In the center of the room stood Sereno, longer behind an energy shield, but still in chains. Beside her was the human child, their satchel. On the table, eyes sharp and ready, the judge's voice rang out. This court will now hear the final evidence in the case of Sci of the Outer Colonies, accused of theft of the Valen data crystal. The trial of truth will conclude today, and the verdict will be binding. The prosecutor rose first. He spoke smoothly, painting Sarai as a dangerous opportunist, someone who could have worked with Lord Varen. He waved the empty container found in her home like it was the final nail in the coffin. "You see, Your Honor," he finished, "guilt clings to her like shadow." When it was the defense's turn, the child didn't rush. They opened their satchel and pulled out to object a battered security recorder from before, and a new device the crowd hadn't seen yet. "This," the child began, holding up the small, flat disc, "is a truth resonance scanner. It's an ancient human invention, adapted to work with most species. When placed near someone answering a direct question, it can detect microtremors in their voice and body that reveal if they're lying." The judge's red eyes narrowed. "And you intend to use this in my court?" "Yes," the child said simply. On the prosecutor, the crowd gasped. The prosecutor laughed sharply. "This is ridiculous. Objection overruled," the judge said, almost too quickly. "Proceed." A guard brought the scanner to the prosecutor's table. The child asked only one question. "Did you know Lord Varen planned to steal the crystal before the night of the theft?" The room went silent. The prosecutor's smile faltered. "No," he said. The scanner pulsed red. Gasps filled the chamber. The prosecutor's scales rippled nervously. "This device must be faulty," the child interrupted, their voice like a blade. "Try again. Under oath." The judge gestured for him to answer. The prosecutor's jaw tightened. "Yes, I knew." Chaos exploded in the courtroom. The prosecutor's admission meant the case against Sarai was more than flawed, was rotten to its core. Guards moved in, seizing the reptilian lawyer before he could bolt. The child turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the truth is clear. My mother was framed. The evidence was planted. The real thieves have confessed with their own actions and words." The judge tapped their claw slowly, considering. The whole galaxy was watching. The council? Members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Setting Sarai free would humiliate them. But keeping her imprisoned now would be worse. It would make the court itself a laughingstock. Finally, the judge spoke. "The court finds Sarai of the outer colonies not guilty." The words seemed to echo forever. Sarai closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her silver cheek. The chains around her wrists released with a soft hiss. Falling to the floor, the crowd erupted not with laughter or disbelief, but with cheers. The human child stepped forward and wrapped their arms around their mother, and she held them so tightly it was as if she would never let go again. The judge continued, their voice sharp as a blade. "Let the record show that this verdict was reached through the trial of truth, and that the actions of Lord Varen and the former prosecutor will be punished according to law." Guards began leading the disgraced council member and the reptilian lawyer out. The drones swarmed them, capturing every shameful step. But the galaxy wasn't watching them. They were watching the child in the days that followed. Stories of the trial spread to every world. People spoke of the tiny human who had stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy and forced them to admit the truth. Some called it the boldest legal victory in living memory. Others whispered that it was the beginning of a new era, one where even the smallest voice could challenge the greatest powers. As for Sarai and her child, they left the capital quietly, taking a small shuttle back to the outer colonies. No parades, no speeches. They didn't need them. On the journey home, Sarai sat beside her child, staring out at the streaks of light in hyperspace. "I never asked you," she said softly, "but were you ever afraid?" The child looked at her and smiled faintly. "Every second. But I was more afraid of losing you." She pulled them close, her voice thick with emotion. "I am proud of you, my little lawyer." The stars outside glimmered like distant witnesses to their victory, and somewhere, across 1,000 worlds, people still whispered the same words. "I'm my mother's lawyer," said the human child before the galactic judge. The court fell silent.